Go for it. Hey, thanks everybody. Full house. Not a problem. We're going straight ahead. So, system thinking and event driven. Oh, before I forget, of course, our sponsors who made it all possible to be in this awesome environment to talk with each other. So, I jump over the commercials and I go directly in this one. So I did say that I was going to talk about systems thinking and event-driven architecture, but in reality what we're talking about is how do we fill the gap between business architecture and project implementation. Business architecture, does it actually exist? I think that we as IT have taken control over the business architecture. We want to tell them how business architecture looks like. Do you know any business architect in an organization? No, it's the enterprise architect or it's the solution architect. It's not somebody from the business. And what we're trying for years now is teach the business to learn how we talk. And in the end, we have failed all the time. Could be them, but perhaps it's us. So I think that system thinking in combination with event-driven architecture actually gives us the tools to be able to talk to them. How and why should we even be doing it? Because there must be money behind it that gives us a reason to do all that effort. And indeed, we still are in the situation that most initiatives, let's say IT initiatives, because we've got numbers on those and we're talking just the US, $3 billion a year that we lose on miscommunication. But the initiatives that we're trying to execute on are usually not the problem. It's something else. What is it? What we're thinking, what we're hoping for, is that we work in a mature organization where everybody works according to how we learned it at the university, that an organization should function. Reality is not always the same. How it should work is that we've got the CEO or the C-level team in the top of the organization. We have a vision. And I'm going to tell you my vision, and you guys just do it. That goes to the executive level. Those guys think, I understand the CEO. I'm going to tell you guys what the strategy is. How can we achieve this? And then, of course, everybody at operations is immediately, yep, we're going to do that, and we know how to do this, and we're going to create that vision into reality. However, the reality is different. The reality is that the CEO poses the vision, but already starts telling you what that vision is in the form of a solution. So it's not their vision that you're getting, it's their assumption of that the solution should look like. Same, executive level. Yep, we do understand what you want, CEO, and actually we have solution 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 you can buy, 2 is probably going to fail, but I've got a friend and he knows how to do number 3. And then we end up in operations, and operations is going to say, no, we're not just going to do what you guys think we should be doing. We have our own opinions, and we actually think that these are the solutions. So everybody has assumptions about solutions. And there were some brilliant people in the past that thought we have a solution for that problem, which is waterfall. Yeah, we're going to define the problem. And then we do a solution proposal, we're going to make all kinds of designs, and then we're going to implement that, and then we're going to validate it, and we fail because time has moved on and the organization too. So that didn't quite work out. Then we got Agile. Agile, problem definition, solution proposal, exactly the same thing. But we take just a short implementation and we validate that implementation. And we say, we're wrong. And we try it again. We're wrong again, but we're closer. And we do it again and again. But we fail early, so it's all good. Why do we fail constantly? Because the start of the whole thing is we start with assumptions. And that means that we're taking those assumptions with us through that whole journey. Yeah? It's full of bias. Yeah? The stakeholders come up with their own ideas. And then we're going to figure it out, but we can't always talk to all the stakeholders. So we're going to make assumptions because we can't stop the project. And we're full of assumptions. And assumptions are won't say that here in public, but it's not a polite thing. And actually, we then try to solve Agile by introducing UX, where UX is going to help us prototype so that people can see if we understood what they wanted. And then they say, that's what we want. But the only thing that UX has done with the prototyping is build a picture in everybody's head that is different in everybody's head. And we think we're going in the same direction, but nobody has tested the prototype if it's going to deliver. It just confirmed our assumptions, or it didn't. Or the color wasn't nice. So what we're actually doing in Agile is trying to solve a communication problem. How do we talk with our customers? How do we understand the stakeholders? How do we all get on the same page? And all the methodologies over the last 20, 30 years have been focused on, why do we get the requirements wrong? Let's try to fix that. And it's just confirming and embedding the bias and the assumptions in the whole process. It does not help. So what does help? First, a little bit of a sidestep into how, I'm not going to say most developers, some developers, they tend to do linear thinking. What's linear thinking? That's, I'm being set a goal. Okay? I make a decision how to solve that goal, how to get to that goal. I need a water pump to get water. Yep. And state of the system, at the end, we have a system that gets water. Awesome. And then all the developers in the room will say, I can do that too. So everybody has the purpose now of getting water. And they all buy water pumps. But the state of the system is that there's no longer water because so much was consumed that actually, although they all did the same thing, we've got a different outcome. And that's what system thinking is about. System thinking is about systems affecting other systems, even if they don't directly communicate with each other. Just the fact that they are in the same context is sufficient that you get side effects. And that's the core of system thinking, is that systems on themselves have a function which you can model, but the trick is to discover and to model what the side effects are, because that shows you why things can go wrong. Like if we compare that with, I'll build a service that handles event handlers. And then I do a second service, a second instance of exactly the same service. And my system fails. Why? Because they're fighting on who is going to handle that event, and sometimes they take both of them, and sometimes, depending on the internet, it will just be A and then B, and sometimes it's B and E, and we haven't written code that takes that into account, that those systems, though they are the same, can influence each other because they are part of a bigger system. System thinking also has some problems that we have in IT. Sometimes it can get really complex if you want to model everything. So one of the ideas actually of system thinking is to, again, why do you model? To simplify things, to make them more abstract so that you can understand them. When you start to model everything, you lose that purpose. So be careful how far you model something out. One of the most important diagrams in system thinking is the causal loop diagram. And the simple version, which you can find everywhere on the internet, is actually the principle of we have a reinforcing loop, Earth, and the population will increase. And then we can have a balancing loop. In this case, we will have a balancing loop, which is actually people dying. And the stripes over there indicate that it can take time before that effect is seen in the population. Yeah? So what designers that use system thinking often do is they see those reinforcing loops, and then they're going to look at, hey, a reinforcing loop always dies at a certain point. Example is mostly lack of resources. Yeah? You can't keep throwing resources to a thing. I've got a really lame joke, but it doesn't solve a problem if you want to deliver a software project in 9 months. It actually doesn't help to take 9 developers. It's still being delivered in that same time. So you really need to use these types of methodologies to identify what resources are being consumed and what are the balancing loops that can keep that circle going. That's the end goal. And when I looked at this, I actually recognized something, and that is that what we're talking about here, systems are interacting with each other. That's the only thing that we're looking for. If there's no interaction, there's no common system. There are no side effects. As soon as there's interaction, we have a certain outcome. And my conclusion was, a system is not the sum of its parts. It's actually the sum of the interactions between the parts. So, the parts are actually not important. The only thing we need to model are the actual interactions. Those are the only relevant parts in that whole picture that lead to something, that have an outcome. So for me, that means that I can ignore technology, because systems can be people, systems can be organizations, yeah, because we also interact with systems. So I've got a means here to model my whole business process, every step, the whole organic technical environment with one methodology, purely looking at what are the rules of the interaction, what are the results of that interaction which lead to an outcome, which in my technical terminology is an event. One of the key elements in here is also, how do we define an outcome? An outcome is not just 4% increase in cost or decrease in cost or whatever. What we actually want to look at is, how does the outcome drive change in the behavior and attitude of people? try to do that scenario in your head where you actually, instead of just thinking, what's my business doing? We deliver burgers. Okay, and this project is that we sell more burgers. Yes, so how is that going to change? So you're going to produce more burgers. How is that going to change the behavior of your customers, that they are going to buy more burgers? So instead of focusing on producing more burgers, you actually need to focus on how do we change the behavior of our customers that they are going to buy more burgers. So the whole paradigm of what you're trying to achieve shifts to actually focus on marketing in this case. Yeah? And that's how you can challenge your leadership in saying, okay, you want us to do this? It's basically a different form of why. Yeah? But say to your leadership, how can you tell me how this is going to change the behavior of our customers? And those could be internal customers, like the turnaround time of tickets, bugs. Why is that important that you lower the turnaround time of bugs? Who benefits? Why is that important? Yeah, an example that I had was a guy at a conference asked, hey, how can you help me use system thinking into translating legacy architecture into a new architecture? Why? What is the outcome that you want? Do you want a new architecture? Yes. Who's going to become happy of a new architecture? Nobody. What turned out was that their old architecture actually locked them so much in that they couldn't quickly react to bugs. So the actual outcome that they wanted was to improve their ticket time, And again, as I already mentioned, that's a question of looking at how do I change the attitude or the behavior of our customers? They become happy people. So, and usually, and this is also really important, ideally it's a positive impact, but it can also be a neutral impact. So it's perfectly fine to say we need to upgrade our systems because otherwise we run into that we can't support it anymore or whatever. Then you've got a neutral outcome. Not quite, because internal stakeholders will probably be more happy with the new system. And so again, it's just when there's negative value, people will not be happy because you can point out, hey, if we do this, then the performance of the system will go down. So actually you will never achieve your outcome because perhaps it was neutral, but because of the drop in performance, we actually now have a negative value stream. So we have an interaction between two systems, and as a result, we can define an event that something has happened. And the fact that something has happened delivers us facts. But it only delivers us facts when we know where the event took place and in what time the event took place. So the context wherein you create a business event is important. If you don't have that context, you don't have knowledge, and you don't have facts, you have information. And that's a big difference. Domain events are supposed to contain facts, knowledge. However, life is never that simple. So what you also need to look at are the rules of the interaction. What was allowed, and that's true between people, it's true between systems, what APIs are available. They will limit you in what can be achieved with the interaction. So that's important. And even more important is who owns the rules. Because this is where in bigger organizations you run into that, hey, my boss tells me to do it like this, so I'm being forced to create the wrong outcomes. Yeah, so ownership of the rules is actually where management can look at the model and say, we need to change the ownership because it's stopping us of getting the right results out of an interaction. So you see that this model goes way further than just system modeling. It actually models the whole behavior of an organization. So I start always with an outcome. I ask my stakeholders, what do you want as an end result of this exercise? Why do I do this? So that I've got a starting point. The next step that I take is how I'm going to measure that I'm going to achieve this outcome or have achieved the outcome. Sometimes it's sufficient that you're on the road towards that outcome. So don't measure about the final state that you want to be. Try to measure that you're going towards that state. That means that I need to receive certain facts. So it means that I have a need to know that something has happened. So there must be an interaction so that I get that information. And by defining that interaction, I can see the components, the facts in that interaction of what do I need to know to measure. Next thing that I then can do is go further backwards and say, okay, where did that information come from? What interaction was necessary to actually get that event? And all the way backwards, you go to the source, the initial interaction, so that you have all the information flows coming together. And that means that none of these steps I'm guessing. I always work with what I know. I know I need to have this information at this point. I can run into the situation that I don't know where that other information comes from, that we don't have a source yet. Yeah? But then again, we can go to the business and say, how do you get, to whom do you interact to get that information? Is it a system? Is it a person? Is it another organization? So I never assume. And the other thing really important is there's no bias. The CEO has no influence on this. He's only got influence on the definition of the outcome. Nothing else. And the executive team will probably decide what the OKRs are, how they're going to measure those results. Yeah, because they need to map that to, the proof that the vision is achievable. So we can model the whole flow without programming anything, and we can already prove if the outcome is achievable, yes or no. Keep that thought. Yeah, so this is just a repeat. Define the outcomes, define the facts to measure it, discover the interactions that result in those facts, and then you keep going and repeating. But you never fail. And you never start over again, because it means that until that point, you were on the right track. So it's extremely efficient. You don't go off in wild goose chases like you do with Agile. That you think, somebody mentioned, perhaps that's the solution to our problem. No, you only work with what you know you will need. So what has this to do with event-driven architecture? Well, I probably already showed it in the form of, I get events. So what I've found out, my personal opinion, but CQRS architecture is perfect for this, because it actually separates all my concerns around scalability. In the talk of this morning, I saw the monolith. The third form, was defined as a monolith because we were using a central database schema. If you use CQRS in combination with event sourcing, we no longer have a database schema that's common over the whole monolith. So we have complete separation of concern. And I will show you later why it's important, and that's done in event modeling. So my model of interactions delivers events, and from events I can build an event model, which is basically an implementation layout of system state change, but on the low level. I'll get back to that one. So CQRS, for those people that don't know about it, it's command query responsibility separation. It's something that's been around for a long time. About 20 years ago, they already found out, hey, it would actually be a good thing if the write model is different from the read model. Because the read model, what the business needs in reporting or in new UIs, is constantly changing. But the data that feeds into the database is way more stable. Yeah, so the problem of traditional command service, command query responsible separation is that it still uses a database schema. So every time there's a change, we still need to change the system. With event sourcing in the mix, we break that dependency on the database schema, and I will explain shortly why, but it means that the right side of things is completely separated, and we can have a service that is optimized for writing, and it means that writing only uses a little CPU power, so we can have a cheap service, while the read side where we do our queries, we have more heavy processing power requirements, so we can run those as completely and scale those as completely as separate services. So event sourcing, how does it work? It starts with a command, could be a mediator pattern, something comes in from an interface, it goes into a command handler, and it receives an event, and it stores this event in an event store. Could be a dedicated event store, could be a relational database, not important. Then the next thing is, as soon as this has been saved, because only when it's actually saved, persisted, then it's real. If we haven't saved an event, it hasn't happened. So at this point, it has happened, and that means that I can listen, hey, has trial requested happened? And then I can publish it. So first save, then you publish your event. And in that case, I can have a query projector that listens to that event and says, okay, I have a dedicated view, a UI, a report, whatever, that's interested in that one, in this structure. So it starts to build a projection, a materialized view, that's dedicated purely to that one view. You don't have common tables anymore, you make a view, a projection, per UI or element of a UI. Then I've got a new event, doesn't contain anything, so I have nothing to project and to change. And then I get email confirmed, still nothing happens. Then suddenly I got a user that's been registered, and because the user was registered, I've got all my information to start a trial. At that point, I update my user table because I'm interested in the fact that I've got a user. And what it also has done is updated the trial record, but not with the 30 days duration as is in the event. No, I can do a calculation and provide what is needed in the view. Yeah, so I don't need to do any calculations anymore. And in this way, you also avoid all the joins that you need to do, because you just flatten out the whole table to everything you need. Hey, you're not going to put the country table in there, but yeah. And then you can project it, and your view is there within a couple of seconds instead of that you have to wait 2 minutes. So where does event modeling fit in? Event modeling, I have translated a little bit in the naming conventions that Arjan Noordhoek has used. I've changed those into talking about timelines. Where in time does an event sit? He calls it the story flow. The other thing, what's sort of missing in the traditional event model is context. So for me, it's really important to tell where, for which departments are these events. Yeah, a really good example is you got a UI that for starting a trial, and it also includes, I subscribe to a newsletter. Why would that be interesting for the trial? It's nothing to do with them. So actually, what's happening here is that we have two actions in the same UI that deliver two events. So you will have a trial requested event, and you will have a newsletter requested event. You don't put the fact, I want a newsletter, in the trial requested. It's not in their context. They're not interested in it. And by doing that, you also achieve separation of concerns. What if I want to capture more information with the newsletter? What day was it asked for? Yeah, again, nothing to do with the trial. And last one is the ability to, again, get the actors. You already have the actors. They are the systems in my interaction model. So how does that look? No clue if this. So here you see that you're going to define events. Yeah. In this case, it automatically figures out that I want to have a subscription aggregate. What is the actor? Next event. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Trial requested. Just the traditional, it's only 2-3 years old, but the traditional event storming approach. Yeah, where you start to capture what events are there. But the big difference for my approach is I should already know which events I need. Yeah, so I prefer to gather the events by doing the interaction modeling, coming from the outcome and then backwards, instead of just sitting there and, oh, I remember this event. Yep, I remember the other one. Yeah, because in doing it like this, I need to check if I'm complete. While otherwise I would already know that I'm complete. So I've got all those events. Next, I need to place them on a timeline. A little bit faster. And as I mentioned, it's not sufficient that it's just on the timeline. I also need to place it in a context. So you can create multiple contexts that have multiple timelines. And that allows you to see where events need to come from another context, and where you see dependencies between contexts, dependencies between departments. So you start to identify which stakeholders do I actually need to involve to get this completely tested. So here we have the complete high-level model, and then I'm able, changing the order of the events, looking good, almost, got it, I got it, and then we go to the actual event modeling part of it, because we now have all the events, and here I'm doing the same trick again. I'm actually Adam is jumping here to storytelling. Starts with storyboarding, but we already have the events. So what I'm doing here is saying, how did I get this event? Where did it come from? I need a command handler and an interface, or the purple one is an automation. Yeah, and each of those live in their own slices. This is where you break down your whole composition of your system into slices of work. You don't need Jira anymore. This is where you've got your to-do list. And people start promoting that developers actually do the full slice. You are responsible for a slice. So you can do fixed contract pricing with this. Because at a certain point, you know how long it takes to create those slices. Except for the UI, of course, that's always. Yeah? So the only thing that I need to do here is tell where is the information coming from? Which events do I need to create what projection? So I immediately know that I'm missing events. Yeah, so everything is explicit. And it also means that I can easily test each of those slices. Yeah, there's no problem whatsoever, because given I got these events, I want to do this command, and then it should deliver these events. Always the same pattern. All right. So we have predictability, as I just explained. What else do we have? For those that really love Agile, we've got our stories and we have our epics. Because an epic is actually a flow of events that need to be there to get an outcome. An epic is an outcome. A story is a slice. And each slice always delivers value. And the other important thing about working in those slices is that we can follow the open-close principle. We don't need to change these slices. We can just introduce a new slice and phase out the old slice. Yeah, so we're not touching this stuff once we've done it. The only problem is it gets really boring. Yeah? So my advice is actually, as developers, you're not software developers, you're software designers. Focus on design. This is all design. And they will need you to know where you can put automation and where you can put other stuff. So this vision actually of a mature organization is achievable if you follow that approach, because we've got clear outcome has been defined, the strategy is clear because we need to have those interactions, and then you can decide where you dive into the detail and do the event models to get the deliverables. That's my talk. Any questions?
Questions, yes, Michael.
That looks awful like a finite state machine. Is that on purpose?
It is a state machine. Yep.
Anyone else? We've got time for a couple.
I've overwhelmed them.
If your brain is still operating.
Hey, thank you. It's good to hear talk about systems thinking at these kind of conferences. You mentioned something about how the modeling in this way can be free of bias because you only control like the outcome and then you're going and looking for facts. But I don't know if you're familiar with like the concept of Goodhart's law about how any metric that becomes a measure ceases to be useful because system behavior changes around the fact that you're now measuring this thing. Do you have any comments on that, on kind of like things that can be introduced by the choice of events?
What I've noticed is that they are going to be desperate to put their bias in at the beginning, at the outcome stage. And that's why it's so important to ask that question, how does it change the behavior of people? Because that's often missing. So if you have that question in there, they can't escape their reasoning to deliver something. And there will always be, this is just how it is. Yeah, I've got a boss in Germany and we're just a small sister company and he's calling the shots and he said, outcome is 5% savings. But then at least you can say, I told you so.
Right, we've got time for one last question, then we have a giveaway. Ooh. I'll pull my reserve speaker. That's the question. When you put a talk together, you always press for time. Is there something that you wish you could have included in this talk that you didn't get a chance to? One thing.
One thing. Okay. I think don't be afraid to experiment with this. Most people will be skeptical because it's a completely different approach. But what you really need to, as a developer, I think what your journey is about discovery. So just give it a try. And what's really important, and that brought me with all these concepts, is think a little bit deeper when you use a word. What does that word actually mean? You know, this whole thing for me got started because I wasn't happy about the word event in event modeling, because event is still a technical term. And that's why I finally ended up with the word interaction, because business people know what interactions are. They don't know what events are. That's weddings and stuff like that. Yeah. So that was, I think, the most important thing. Think about the value of words and if they fit in the context. If not, keep searching till you find the right one.